but you do want to play a profoundly sad game about going home and finding everyone you knew basically is dead and then having to clean up after it, go play this game. Welcome back to the Middle of Culture. I'm one of your hosts, Eden.
And I am your other host, Peter.
Hey, Peter, how you been? It's, it is, dear listeners, full disclosure, it's the first day of 2026. We're welcoming the year in with a bang by hopefully recording a banger. But how you been, Peter?
I have been very good. I have had a little time off starting yesterday. I'm very confused about the days because I was on call the weekend before the week of Christmas. And then I worked the whole week of Christmas and had to go in for a couple hours on Christmas Day, had to go in again the day after Christmas, was on call those next two, Saturday and Sunday, then worked Monday, Tuesday, and then was off yesterday, and I'm off until next Tuesday. So I am having an absolute just disastrous time remembering what day of the week it is. But the good news is when I do remember, it is earlier in the week than I expect. So my brain was like, yeah, exactly. My brain yesterday was like, oh, yeah, this is Saturday. I'm like, no, this is Wednesday. And today I'm like, oh, I got to go to work in a day or two. I was like, no, I don't have to go to work. So I'm doing great. How are you?
Beautiful. Also very confused in terms of what day it is. I don't know if I mentioned it here or not last time, but with the kids, as I like to call them, the two younger folks who work at the comic shop, both went home for Christmas. So I didn't want the boss man to be stuck doing everything by himself. So I've worked a lot of extra hours at the comic shop. I did some sweet old double dipping where I was like using my PTO at my day job to go work at the comic shop during work hours. It's great. Who doesn't love to double dip?
I think it sounds brilliant. I got to figure out a way to do that personally.
It's great. How do you think I can afford to buy a DAP? But anyway, I've been working a lot at the comic shop, but that also means that like my perception of time is off because I normally work Wednesdays and Saturdays, and then I worked every day for like a week, and I could never keep track of what day it was.
Yeah, that'd do it.
It was just weird. It was really, really weird. And then the worst part is on a Sunday, I'd ridden my bike into work, and then by the time I was leaving, the weather had really changed. Like it had dropped in temperature precipitously. There was drifting snow everywhere, but I was like, I can do it. I can get home. Listeners, I regret to inform you, I did not make it home unscathed. I come up to the corner of Summit and Burlington, and I'm having to stop because the light changes. And right then, a 35-mile-an-hour gust of wind hits me right as I hit a patch of like loose snow. Whoop, boom! Bike went right out from underneath me. So I have some bruised ribs. Not comfortable, have not slept since because of course, I went down on my left side, which is of course the side that I have to sleep on because I don't know. Are you like a ritualistic sleeper in that way, Peter? Is there a particular like position you need to be in order to fall asleep?
Oh boy. So, and I take some crap from people who know, yes, there is a position I have to be in. And that is completely straight, flat on my back with my two hands on top of my chest, sort of like this, as if I were a corpse lying in state.
I was going to say, it sounds like Tutankhamun is in the house.
That is exactly how I sleep. Yes. But yeah, that is how I have to go to sleep.
Yes. And this is the same way, not that exact position, but in order for me to be able to fall asleep, I need to lay on my right side for approximately 3 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Long enough to start feeling a little sleepy. And then I have to move to my left side. And that is the only way that I can fall asleep, is slightly curled up, not quite fetal, but like legs sort of tucked,
Sure, sure.
Arms not crossed anymore because I used to cross them, and then it was starting to give me carpal tunnel because my wrists were bent like this all night every night. So I had to stop doing that, and I was able to stop doing that, but I still have to be on my left side. But of course, that is the ribs that I fell on. So every
Of
time I
course.
get into that position, I mean, it hurts already to go from vertical to horizontal. Like right now, I'm not in any pain, but the minute I try to go horizontal, my body, like the ribs move just right to be like, okay, then. And it really, really starts flaring. But then as I need
I
to
believe that.
swap from side to side, it's miserable. So I've not really slept
That
well
sucks.
since Sunday.
Yeah, I believe that. I am
It's
sorry.
rough out there. Bruised ribs, no fun. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. How you been, or what have you been up to? Like, here's the thing. I'm springing this on you last second, but it is the 1st of January. What
It
you been up
is.
to? And then what are your bigger thoughts on 2025 as a cultural phenomenon? Like the media that you engaged with during the year. How you feeling about it? What's 2025 like in your pop culture life?
That is an interesting question. So why don't I'm going to intertwine those two questions because
By all means.
part of what I had prepared to share in this time is kind of what were my musical highs? What are my top musical things? So I'll work that in here.
Sure.
In terms of new things that have come out or that I've been checking out recently in the last couple of weeks, let's talk about games briefly. Still playing Megabonk and Ball Pit. Did get a little further in Ball Pit, kind of beat the next level down in the pit, building out my town some more, getting people a little bit stronger, unlocked a new character, and just enjoy that game. It is great. It is another one of those games that, and I don't know, I have a theory, and this theory could be absolutely wrong. But over the last few years, there seems to really have been a proliferation of these $20 and less games that are very engaging, good gameplay mechanics, not super graphically heavy. And you know what? One of the reasons I think we've seen this proliferation is I think that it is the success of the Steam Deck. And not just the Steam Deck, but then all of this glut of other handhelds that have come out over the last few years between Lenovo and MSI and Asus and you know these Chinese companies, I mean 1X Player and all this stuff. But there are so many handheld video game consoles, honestly, available right now, and so many of these games are just perfect for that. You know, you can sit down again, Ball Pit. If you defeat a level, you're going to defeat it in about 15 minutes. In Megabonk, you're going to either defeat it or you're going to get killed in again about 10 minutes. So you're getting these little chunks where you can sit down, you can break out a handheld, you can play. They run beautifully on it, and I love it. I think it's great because for a while it felt like it was either real kind of low quality, just sort of crapped out stuff, or you were looking at that AAA. And let's be honest, while we can't really say those are crapped out, a lot of them are crap. But I love this proliferation of even kind of the AA category. I think most people would consider Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which won the Game of the Year at the VGAs, the Video Game Awards and stuff. I think most people would consider that a AA game, not a AAA game. Mm-hmm. But then also, you know, these, again, like I say, sub $20, relatively can be shorter, kind of contained game experiences. And I've just been really enjoying that stuff because I've been having a hard time finding something bigger to sink my teeth into.
Here's a thought that I have about that. This is related to a conversation I had with a friend the other day. I think that this is an important avenue for games to develop in for multiple reasons. I think what you mentioned about the bite-sized nature of it is really, really good. But there is another thing that I think is currently overlooked in wider discourse, but I think is going to become even more prevalent as the year presses on. And that's that no one can fucking afford parts for a PC anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So
RAM especially.
So what can we get? A Steam Deck. for $500.
Yeah.
Or a Switch 2 for $400. Or even a PS5 or an Xbox. But like, I genuinely think that the PC Master Race era, where that was like, this is the best way to play games, is unfortunately and hopefully temporarily going to come to a close as the AI bros lose their fucking minds. And until that crash comes, hopefully sooner rather than later, this inevitable bubble burst, no one's going to be able to build PCs. So we're going to need things that can run on Steam Decks, on the Steam box that they're putting out, which I think is going to do gangbusters. I think that is going to sell crazy.
If they are able to get it at a reasonable price, I mean, look, I'm going to buy one. Do I need one?
I'm probably going to buy one too.
But I'm going to buy one, and I'm going to plug it in to my big TV downstairs.
Yeah. So
that I can, you know, instead of sitting, if I want to sit downstairs and play games, right now I do it on a Steam Deck or something like that, which is great, which I love. I mean, I have the Steam Deck, and I have more powerful handhelds, and you know which one I use all the damn time? It's the Steam Deck. Yeah. The Steam Deck is just the sweet spot. But
and it runs.
But
things just run on it. And you don't have to there's no ticky-tacky. I feel like even the Windows-based handhelds, there's some sort of ticky-tacky where it's like, the things don't always work right. The inputs aren't always working the way you want them to, blah, blah, blah. No, if it says it's going to run on the Steam Deck, it fucking runs on the Steam Deck.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a really, really astute point to mention because I think RAM is just especially RAM.
Yeah.
And even video cards too. But
but RAM it's absurd. It's absurd. But I think that it is a positive thing because I think that avenue, that middle ground between the like true indie and the AAA is where there is a lot of room for growth. A lot of room for experimentation, a lot of room for just trying stuff that you can't try otherwise. And so I hope that the smaller studios are seeing the writing on the wall that we just talked about, that like no one can afford a high-end PC. So we've got to start designing games specifically and explicitly to run on this lower end hardware, because I think those constraints are good because it means that you need to actually make a game that runs. Which is a problem. Like the amount of times that a game comes out and they're just like, well, sorry, your PC sucks. And you're like, no, that's your fault. You needed to make the game better. You can't just say, well, I made it in UE5, and if you don't have a $4,000 rig, you don't get to play my game right. Well, that's on you. That's not on me. And so I think that as the small form factor market continues to explode in the face of the fact that no one can buy a PC anymore, I hope that means that they design for those, and that means we get smaller games with worse graphics made by people who are getting paid better, as the old Sonic the Hedgehog meme joke says. And I'm not joking. I want smaller games that are worse by people who are paid better. That's what I want.
Well, and it's really interesting. This brings to mind an article I read a while ago, but some of my highlights from it have bubbled back up in Readwise frequently enough lately that I was reminded of this. And as we get to the end of the year and everybody's talking about, their New Year's resolutions and all that stuff, which I hate, go listen to the most recent episode of Generations when Aubrey and I talk about why New Year's resolutions are bad and it's a terrible system. But the title, I think, of this article was, "You don't need goals, you need limits." And the whole premise of this article falls back to this, where we shouldn't be you're not doing yourself big favors if you're setting these great big goals for yourself. You're better off if you say, okay, well, what are my limits and how do I work within these limits? And maybe where do I set new limits to help me progress? And I think that's a lot what you're pointing out is, okay, here are some limits that are being imposed by this hardware situation. So make better games within those limits. And it's interesting. You talk about the graphics, and I'll mention this briefly. For all the other things about them that bug me, but one of the things that Nintendo's always done is they have such good art style in their games that you don't care that their hardware is, in some cases, generations behind everybody else. Case in point, for fun, because I'd never played it, I started playing Super Mario Galaxy on the Nintendo Switch 2. Super Mario Galaxy came out in 2007. Now, does Super Mario Galaxy look as good as, say, Donkey Kong Country and the Mario Kart World? No, you can tell it's older, but does it still look really pretty good because of Nintendo's consistent, excellent art direction? It absolutely does, because they learned how to work within those limitations.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to be said about limitation as a design ethos. Like, some of the best movies that you've ever seen were made on small budgets and with those types of constraints, where they were like, we have this very narrow window in which to do this thing we want to do. And it's not the blank check filmmaking that are the best films I've ever seen. Like, are those fun to watch sometimes? Sure. I don't really know. I haven't seen Avatar 2 or 3. My friend was raving about Avatar 3 to me all day at work yesterday. And I said, I'm so happy that you're happy with Avatar 3. I don't give a shit. And I never will.
Yeah. I hear you.
But the fact of the matter is, I find that art is at its best when there is those constraints to it. And I think that that's true of games. You know, when are some of the most productive and most affecting games that I've ever played are games that came out in tough situations, you know? Like, why is KOTOR 2 so good? Because their back was against the wall and they had 9 months to make a video game. Why is New Vegas such a good Fallout game? Because their back was against, and maybe this is just Obsidian stuff, but their back was against the wall and they had 10 months to make a video game. You know, why are 7, 8, 9, 10 some of the best Final Fantasy games? Because they were coming out one a year or one every 2 years. It wasn't 8 years between entries in the Final Fantasy series. It was like, we put these fuckers out one after another, reusing assets, you know, using baked in things, keeping our scope smaller, because it keeps it from making a mess. It keeps you from getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Like I say, I think that, and this is interesting. We'll see how you feel, but I think a lot of this conversation that we just had is pertinent to our main topic.
I think so too.
I'll leave it there.
I think so too.
I'll leave that there and we'll come back later. A couple other game things really fast. Diablo 4, they've announced another expansion for it. And if you're a sucker like me and you pre-order the expansion, you have access to the Paladin class already. I really liked the Paladin class in Diablo 3. And so I did recently fire it up and put about an hour or two in playing as a Paladin in Diablo 4. I'm not in deep enough to know what sets it apart, and haven't gotten to the place where, I mean, the Paladin in Diablo 3 was really fun because you could just do so much damage and you were so tanky. You'd unlock the ability to wield massive two-handed maces with one hand, so you still had this massive shield, and you're just cruising around decked out in armor, big old shield, massive, you know, flail that you're just mowing things down with. And I'll be interested to see. I never did finish the first expansion for Diablo 4. The Spiritborn class just didn't, I don't know. It wasn't snagging me like some of the others. We'll see how the Paladin goes. And then the other thing I'll mention is I decided this week I was going to fire up Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Okay. And I played about 80 minutes and I asked myself, do I really want to play a game where I got to sneak around this much? And maybe you don't have to sneak around that much the whole game, but so far I've had to do a lot of sneaking around. And so I'm struggling if I want to come back to that or not. We'll see.
I talked about it a few months ago. I thought the game was really cool. I didn't finish it because, you know, I just didn't feel like finishing it. It was cool. I liked what I played. I got about halfway through it and then I was like, I got other things to do.
Yeah, we'll see. On the book front, I finished the first book in the 3-Body Problem series, the 3-Body Problem. I liked it. It was good. It was interesting. It starts to go places. I did start to, there's kind of a big revelation as the book gets to the end where basically the Trisolarans, the alien race, they have launched their fleet towards Earth in an effort to, they're just going to take it over. They're going to wipe out humanity. They want Earth. It's a much better they're in awe because of their three suns and the chaos that it invokes. They have these stable eras and chaotic eras, and it's blowing their minds that, hey, here's a planet that is in a stable era all the time. How can that be? Well, we want that. We're going to take it over. But see, the problem is in looking at human history, they've become very concerned at humanity's technological advancement rate. We took so many thousands of years to get, from hunter-gatherers to like, I don't know, and then you look at, okay, from this to then get to the industrial era, from the industrial era to this. And then they're looking at it and they're like, yeah, but they went from landing somebody on their moon to this in, just this accelerating pace. They know it's going to take their ships 450 years to get to Earth. And they are concerned that while at the moment they launch the ships, they are technologically advanced beyond what humanity is. Tri-Solaris has never advanced their technology as quickly as Earth has in the last 2 centuries. And so they're very concerned that by the time we get there, they're going to be technologically far beyond where we are. We got to do something about it. And that something involves taking protons, which they refer to as 11th dimension objects, and unfolding them down to become 2-dimensional objects. So they have the mass of a proton, but is an expansive sheet that is basically so big it can surround the planet Tri-Solaris, so that then they can etch on the surface of that the instructions to turn it into basically like a computer, fold it back up to its 11th dimension, accelerate these protons at near the speed of light to Earth, and then they have similar protons, or they call them sophons, on Tri-Solaris, and via quantum entanglement, they can communicate instantaneously between these protons, and these protons they're getting sneaky. These sophons are zipping into little particle accelerators and futzing up the results so that basically all of our science is now getting stalled because we can't make advances. And that was there were parts about that I was like, I don't know enough about particle physics and stuff, but I don't know. But I started the second book yesterday, so I still plan to continue through those because I am intrigued. I am intrigued at where the series is going to go, and I enjoyed that. That's really about it in terms of new stuff. So 2025 is 2025. This was a tough year to really sort of go, how do I feel about it? Because while from a pop culture standpoint, there were some good things, there were so many other ways in which 2025 was just an absolute shit show that it sometimes is hard for me to separate the two out. 2025 is the year that I got into Taskmaster, which I absolutely love and adore. And it was thanks to Series 19 earlier this year with Jason Mantzoukas that kind of did that for me. So that was good. And we continue to plug away at Taskmaster. I find it just utterly enjoyable. I think it was nice that 2025 gave us two of the, maybe I was going to say better, but I actually might say just two of the best Marvel movies since Endgame and kind of Spider-Man No Way Home. That kind of, we sort of wrapped up that first, or I guess Spider-Man No Way Home was in that phase 5 or 4. I don't know where we're at, but I think that the Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, really two of the strongest entries into the Marvel universe since the Infinity Saga wrapped up. And so I like that. That was good. 2025 was interesting in that it's the year where, for me, Brandon Sanderson's cracks really started to show. And I don't know if that's because I read so much Sanderson this year that it just became more obvious. But those cracks really did start to show. At the beginning of 24, I wouldn't have hesitated to say that he was my favorite author. Right now, I'm like, I don't know that I could tell you who my favorite author is, but it's definitely not Brandon Sanderson. Because The Lost Metal and then Rind and Truth there were enough things about reading those two most recent books of his in those kind of key core series that I took a step back and said, okay, maybe you should write less. Maybe you should write fewer books, and maybe you should write better books. Maybe you should just take the foot off the gas a little bit give things a little bit of a break and write books that are better. Just maybe just write books that are better. So yeah. But I will say the highlight in terms of books for me for the year really was Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes. Such a fun book, such a delightful thing. And to just be this surprise that came out of nowhere. Again, my wife bought it for me because she knew somebody who opened a physical bookstore in town and she wanted to support them, walked in and was just walking down shelves and saw a book that said Murder Your Employer. And she thought, even if he never reads it, Peter will love the title of this book, and bought it for me. And then I finally read it and it was a delightful book. I loved it. So, and then, music has been an interesting year this year. There have been some real highs. I think that Allegion's latest album, The Ossuary Lens, was really good, kind of progressive, technical death metal. Bell Witch and Aerial Ruin, Stygian Bow Part 2 or Volume 2 continues to be one of my favorite albums of the year. Just beautiful, haunting, almost epic kind of funeral doom metal. Black Braid 3, just brilliant black metal. It definitely is my favorite black metal album of the year, though the more time I spent with Abigail Williams' A Void Within Existence, the narrower the gap between those two became. Dormant Ordeal, just in terms of straight up just death metal, absolutely my favorite death metal band or album of the year. 1914's Viribus Unitas, again diving back into World War I, just brutal, ugly in all the ways that I think a story about World War I needs to be. Loved Frail, Heretics and Lullabies. That was great. Obscure Sphinx. So good to hear from them again. Their last LP, the previous one, came out in 2016. So it would have been 9 years since we had new music from them. Loved Spirit Box, Tsunami Sea. I think it was a great album, and it was a ton of fun to go and see them live this year with my kids, with some of my kids. And then Raphael Weinroth Brown, brilliant album in Lifeblood. Absolutely love it. Definitely my album of the year. The final thing I want to mention that I kind of discovered in 2025, I didn't discover, I'd been aware of, but 2025 was when I finally said, okay, I'm going to give this a listen. And that is, are you familiar with the podcast, The Rest is History, Eden?
I can't say that I am.
So it is a podcast that's been around. I think it started in 2020. It's a couple of historians from the UK, and they've both written, a bunch of history books, and very, very smart guys. I've heard about The Rest is History. A couple of the hosts on some other podcasts that I listened to talked about it and talk about it frequently. And I kind of subscribed and in the past and tried to listen to an episode or two. I don't know why it didn't click for me. But as they were getting to the end of the year and they were just raving about it, and this podcast won Apple's Podcast of the Year award, I thought, okay, let me check it out. So I downloaded one of the most recent episodes. This was probably only like a month and a half ago. I downloaded an episode, and it was the first of a series of episodes about Jack the Ripper. And I realized I don't know anything about Jack the Ripper. Nothing. So I started listening to it, and each episode's about an hour and 20 minutes long. And I'm listening to this first episode, and I was just enthralled. I was so drawn in to this story. And they tell the story, but they're bringing in a lot of other historians' research and what they said, and they're offering their own opinions, and they're comparing and contrasting. And they have this fun dynamic where often one of the two of them will be a little bit more the expert in whatever topic they're talking about, and will kind of play okay, I'm going to really teach you about this, while the other one like interjects and kind of comes in and out. What about this? And they've really got the format nailed. I finished the end of that episode and realized that it was going to be like a 4 or 5 episode series that were each going to come out every week or two. But if you were a member of their paid The Rest is History Club, you got the whole series right then. And I just was so engaged by the end of that one episode that I said, oh, hell yeah, I'm signing up. And so I signed up and I listened to all of the Jack the Ripper episodes. Then I listened to a few episodes about Walt Disney that actually culminated in them. They had a sit-down interview with Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. And then Bob Iger took them to Disneyland and like took them on rides and stuff like that you can go see on their YouTube channel. Listened to a series about, there's been a bunch of series about World War II. And I mean, all of their things, they kind of break up into smaller chunks where it's okay, here's 4 episodes just about this aspect of this event in history. Listen to that. Listen to a really, really interesting episode where one of the hosts sat down with this kind of antiquities historian from the UK, and she went into, there was a piece they found that was found in like a field, and there were some hints that maybe this actually came from the time of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. And then it was her talking about how did they demonstrate the provenance of this artifact and prove that, yes, it actually was authentic. And now I'm currently listening to one about Horatio Nelson and the Napoleonic Wars, and it's going to culminate in the Battle of Trafalgar. And it's just fascinating. It is an outstanding podcast. It is quickly becoming one of the best things I look forward to listening to whenever I have time. But it's also one of those where, as opposed to some of my other podcasts where it's like, turn it on, do something else. This is like, turn it on and do something else that doesn't require my brain so that I can fully engage in what they're talking about. And so it was a fun year to find some new things that that don't really fit. You know, this podcast, not really what I would normally listen to. Murder Your Employer, not generally the type of book that I would read. So yeah, it was, there were some highs and some lows. I'll put it that way.
Nice. Well, that sounds exciting.
I talked for a long time. Please.
That's okay. We had a big digression about video games as well. I don't have a whole lot to talk about that I've done in the last couple of weeks. That's worth mentioning that isn't just continuing doing things that I've already been doing. Which is part of why I wanted to do like hey, let's look back at 2025. I think you're exactly right in that it was a mixed bag year. I think, outside of pop culture, it was a terrible year, but hey, what are you going to do?
It's the fucking worst.
Yeah, no, it was a real rough year. But what are you going to do? We're all still here. We made it. It's 2026.
We are all still here.
We're here. But there are a lot of things, I think, like you said, that were new to me in 2025, that I really, really am happy that I found. I'll start with podcasts since you ended with podcasts. I have been listening to podcasts with Michael Hobbs on them for years. I listened to You're Wrong About for a lot of years back in the day. And I listened to If Books Could Kill from after its very first episode dropped. I've listened to it multiple times. I think it's a very fun podcast. One of my all-time favorites. I really love those two hosts. But I knew that Michael Hobbs had this other show that he did with Audrey Gordon called Maintenance Phase, which is specifically about diet culture and body image stuff and all that sort of stuff. And so for years, I had kind of avoided listening to it because I didn't really want to put myself in that headspace. Sure. It is a topic that it can be hard to talk about. It can be hard to listen to people talk about, all those sorts of things. But this year I finally did take the plunge and started listening to Maintenance Phase, and I've really come around to really enjoy it. I think it's a really meaningful podcast. I really think that both of the hosts approach fitness, health, weight, diet, all those sorts of things from really good positions. And I think that they do really important work. So I've really been enjoying listening to that podcast. Like you said, enough so that I immediately joined their Patreon. And so I get their Patreon episodes too. Because I feel like I want to pay people for the good work that they do. And this is one of those podcasts that has no ads. So there's literally no way for me to just be like, well, they're getting my ad revenue. No, they're not, because they don't do ads. So the one thing I could do to support them, back them on Patreon. So I did, and I'm glad that I have. I feel like it's been really, it's made me think a lot about the fat phobic nature of modern culture, the ways that in many regards, and I think that this goes along with a thing that we kind of talked about last episode that has been really big for me in 2025. It truly feels like, while there has been backslides, it's a lot easier to ridicule people for being LGBTQ than it was a few years ago. Like, it has become a little more popular, a little more accepted. And I feel like we were to a point where that really wasn't the case, and it kind of has become that way again, you know?
Sure.
There are two things that has always been okay to make fun of, and that has gotten even worse in the last year, and that is fat people and disabled people. Those fat phobia and ableism are alive, well, and everyone loves to point them out and nail down on people for those two things. And I think that it's fucking disgusting. I truly do. I think that it is reprehensible behavior. The repopularization of the R word as a slur that people just say. Like, you just go around on the internet and you just see it all the time, or you'll be scrolling on TikTok and you'll just hear people say it. And it's like, what the fuck, guys? Like, a decade ago, we all decided you don't say this word anymore. But no, it's cool. Everyone's saying it now. And it's always been fair game to make fun of fat people, or just people who are not, bodily normative in the ways that we have decided as a culture is that way. And I think that maintenance phase has helped me come to terms with a lot of those things, both in my own body and the way my own fat phobia both works against me and the way that I perceive my own body and the way that I perceive other bodies. I have lost a fair amount of weight this last year. In no small part thanks to pharmacological intervention. And it has made me think very differently about my own body. And it has made me reflect on the ways that even as a fat person, you come to resent and look down on other fat people instead of standing in solidarity with them and being like, no, everyone treats us all like shit. I am part of this group that is treated this poorly. And especially, this is so common. There's a lot of research about, like, once a fat person loses a fair amount of weight, they become that much more judgmental and fat phobic and really act reprehensible to people who are bigger than them. And so that has been a thing that I've thought a lot about in 2025 and have worked really hard to try to excise from my brain. And it's not easy because, like, the culture in which we are ensconced at all times is so fundamentally against, atypical bodies in any of these ways, be they queer, be they disabled, be they fat. And society is just not built for people like that. And so because you are non-normative, you are seen as aberrant. And I think it's really important to see the ways that works in our own brains. And I think that this podcast has helped me at least a little bit. And it's made me think a lot broader about those things, and then have those kind of hard conversations with people. And I think that's been good.
Interesting. Oh, that sounds good.
It's also worth mentioning, I read a lot this year. I pulled out my little notebook. I ended up reading my 238th book on New Year's Eve.
Wow. That's impressive.
So many books I read. I think I did the math the other day. I think I did 82 prose books, and then the rest of that is comics that I read. So I read a lot. But I read a lot of things that I had never read before for the first time that have really impacted the way that I've thought about culture and the things that I enjoy. I think notably, things worth mentioning, Adachi and Shimamura is incredible, and I have gushed about it multiple times here. I did not even hear about that book series until this year. The works of Keiichi Arawi, both Nichijou and City, were both like comics that really blew my mind, and have made me really think about what you could do in the medium, and the sort of things that comics can do that you can do in other medium, but are hard to do in other media. And that there's a real benefit to using this format to tell those types of stories. And then lastly, I just mentioned Apothecary Diaries, which is another one that I've really enjoyed. I've enjoyed revisiting as I've been reading them aloud to Cassie. We were talking just last night that, it's been a couple of weeks since I've read out loud to her, and we really need to get back to that. So that's one of our, again, we're not resolution people, but you do make goals, and goals are different than resolutions fundamentally. I believe to my core. So one of my goals this year is to just do that more often. Just, spend a little more time with my wife, reading books out loud to her. And I want to get back to Apothecary Diaries. We're partway through book 6. We still got 10 to go before she's caught up.
That's cool.
But yeah, I feel like, again, pop culture wise, it's been interesting. There's been a lot of interesting stuff. I think that my own interactions with pop culture have changed in a lot of ways. There have been times when I've been playing a whole lot of gacha games, and I have really pared back on those in the last couple of months. I don't have a single one of those Hoyo games installed on my PC anymore. I'm not out here playing Genshin or Star Rail or Zenless Zone Zero, because I'm just like, I reached a point where I just kind of burnt out on them, and that's okay. And that's good. And I could move on to other things, spend my time doing other stuff. So, that's kind of where we're at. But
very cool.
Talking about video games, let's move on to the main event for today.
About video games.
So after our last chat, Peter and I were talking, and I was like, I'd really like to play a game, but I want to find something short. But I think something that we'd both really enjoy. And I had seen this talked about on Blue Sky. I think I saw conversations about video games. And so I said, hey, I haven't played this before. I'm not really familiar with it, but maybe we should give it a try. I hear it's pretty short. And so today we played the game Ambrosia Sky, which was pitched to me as, hey, what if Power Wash Simulator had more of a story and was in like a weird sci-fi setting? And I was like, okay, I like Power Wash Simulator. We've talked multiple times about how we both really like Power Wash Simulator. And so I kind of sight unseen was like, hey, let's both play this game, and you were up for it. And so that is what we did. And I think that I'm curious to see how you felt about it, but I think that sales pitch of Power Wash Simulator in a dystopian sci-fi setting really sells short what this game is in comparison. How'd you feel about this game, or what did you think about it, Peter?
So I'm going to start with this and say 60 to 90 minutes in, I was a little worried that I was going to sit down to record and say, yeah, I couldn't finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I finished it, I was so bummed that the story wasn't done.
Yeah. Yeah. This is important to note. This is only Act 1 that is out, listeners.
Yeah. So it was it was a bit of a journey in that regards, in that at first I didn't know if I was going to actually be able to play this to completion.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of bouncing off a few aspects of it. But then once I'd figured a few things out and, you unlocked a few things and then stopped kind of stressing about stuff, then I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very interesting story that was told in an effective way, even if there were definitely times where I was like, I kind of wish things were a bit more explicit so that I knew better what was going on.
Yeah. I feel like I ended this with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. Very, very, very few answers, especially in regards to a lot of the proper nouns of the work. Like, what is the Ambrosia Project? I don't know. What does a scarab actually do besides shoot water at things to make the fungus disappear? I don't know. What is a Leviathan, why are there organs around, and what does that mean? What does any of this mean?
Yeah. Yeah. What exactly are you doing when you biologically reclaim a body and it turns into a little flower that's grown out of what looks like a strand of DNA? I mean,
yeah. Really evocative, really evocative. I gotta say, I think that the art direction is really good in this game, especially for, it's one of those things where you can tell that this is a small budget game that is made by a small studio with, a couple dozen people max, probably even smaller than that. I watched the credits. There was a lot of repeat names, and there were not many of those names. So this is a small studio doing a thing. And again, like you said, releasing the first part of a game. And, I think that is both a brave and a tough move, because they could have done early access and they didn't. They chose to do it in acts rather than do early access. I think that's probably the right move, because I wouldn't have bought it or paid for it if it had been an early access game. But I
agree.
I did pay for it and play it because it told me it was Act 1, which told me, okay, this is a product that they felt comfortable releasing, saying this is the product. We'll give you more. There will be more available for sale in the future, but this is the product as it is. And so I think that was the right choice. I do, I will say, I think we'll get into a little bit of spoiler territory, talk through stuff, but the last map gave me some issues. I had to I tried to do some digging to find out, how do I open these fucking doors? And nothing was did not find any good answers online, I will say that. But I did stumble onto the Steam discussion forums where there was a fair amount of conversation about the idea of, why did you do this as an Act 1? Now I'm going to have to pay for the rest of this game. And it's like, don't be such assholes. Like, the developers are here in this forum talking to you.
Wait. No. Just a second. Are you really trying to suggest that gamers in any way, shape, or form are going to stop being assholes?
I'm saying they should. I'm not saying they will.
Yeah, I know they should, but we all know that they're never I mean, I don't disagree with everything you've said.
Especially the type of people who post on the Steam discussions forums.
Correct.
Because those are the biggest losers who have ever lived. If you are on Steam in the discussion forums, sauceless, maidenless behavior. What are you doing?
It's true. That's interesting. So do we want to just
let's do it.
Say from here.
Here's what I'll say. If you don't want to be spoiled, but you do want to play a profoundly sad game about going home and finding everyone you knew basically is dead and then having to clean up after it, go play this game. If you want to hear us talk about it, then stick around.
And before we actually go into spoiler territory, I think it's important to highlight something that you already mentioned, and that is, yes, I guess some of these things are spoilers, but nothing is answers.
No.
All we're going to talk about are things that raise more questions.
We're going to talk about a lot of proper nouns. We're going to talk about some characters who we know very little about. And probably some gameplay that is mostly pretty fun and occasionally extremely annoying.
Yeah, definitely.
So, the premise of the game Ambrosia Sky, you play as a character whose name starts with a D, and I can't think of what it is right now.
Now that you said it, I can't remember. It
starts
Dahlia,
with a D.
I think.
Dahlia. It's Dahlia.
I think it's Dahlia.
You play as a woman named Dahlia who goes back to the weird colony in the asteroids around Jupiter and Saturn where she grew up and where she ran away from 15 years ago. And she has to go back now because she works as a scarab, which are question mark, people who go around, clean up after weird fungus and exofungus that's growing all over the solar system, and also reclaim bodies that have been dead less than 48 hours and who have seeded their genetic code to the Ambrosia project. And you basically dissolve their bodies if they are not more than 48 hours dead, and they turn into DNA that turns into a flower. You also are collecting Leviathan parts, which are parts of a Leviathan ? Again, that's all we know, is that this colony was built in the guts of a dead Leviathan. And so they use Leviathan parts to try to make things grow ? But you go back, you have been gone for 15 years. You go back, your bitch of a stepmom. The game never uses that term, but it's fairly clear. Your stepmom is a terrible person. Everyone hates her. She is the administrator of this colony. She is why you ran away, leaving your girlfriend Maeve behind. And boy, was she mad at you about that, and understandably so. But you get called back 15 years later because the fungus is out of control and they need a scarab to come clean it up. And everyone is dead or missing. and you don't know where anyone is. You're finding a lot of dead bodies. You are cleaning up a lot of fungus. You are reading a whole lot. This is very immersive simmy in that you are reading a lot of terminals. You are reading a lot of emails or personal journals. You are kind of interacting with and trying to solve the question of what happened since I left through these data objects rather than through actual conversations. You don't hold a single conversation with a single person during the course of the game. But you just kind of explore, clean up, collect things until you get to the end. And as you said, it leaves you with nothing but questions. You finish the last level, and I thought surely there'll be a level after this one where I meet with Maeve because, you know, your handler dude says there's life signs out there. Maeve is still out there. She's out there alive. And so I thought maybe we will reunite with her and that is where it will end. No, sir, not at all. You finish that last level and then it just leaves you in like a call with her as she is like growing fungus from her body. And you just go, Maeve, what have you done? And then the game is over. It was good. It was really good. It was so evocative. That's the thing that I really liked about this game is it used the constraints of being an indie game, having a small budget to, I think, tell a story pretty effectively while, you know, occasionally having quibbles with it. I don't know. What were your thoughts on
it? Like I said, there's an interesting thing that I'm going to mention at the beginning. For reasons I still don't fully understand, this game kept reminding me of parts of Mass Effect.
Okay,
I think it was exploring derelict space ruins in kind of an eerie, haunting way, because there's a fair amount of that in different stages and different missions in the Mass Effect game.
There's at least one in every single Mass Effect game.
So I think that's why that was the thing that it kept making me think of. But it's, again, there's almost like a very mild, thank goodness, but a mild sort of Metroidvania aspect to it in that you're going to go on little missions, and depending on when you choose to go to that particular mission, because you do like the first one, and then from there, here's just a few other missions, and you can just pick whatever order you want. And then you're going to pick more until you get to the last one. But you absolutely could go on a mission where you're not going to be able to go everywhere and do everything because you haven't unlocked certain upgrades. And you can go back to those missions afterwards and try and clean 100%. And I don't know, did you ever do that? Did you ever go back to a place after you had gone to it?
A couple of them because I wanted to see if it made any difference. But then I kind of stopped because I wanted to keep moving.
Yeah, I mean, I only did it once, and it was interesting. In going back to one that I had completed, you had across the top a little percentage cleaned, both for the whole place you were at and then for each room that you went into, to kind of help you clean it out if you wanted to do that. Again, I went back once just to go into one room that was obvious I couldn't get into because I didn't have the burning, flamey one yet.
Yeah.
And then I went in and I popped in there and I was like, oh, I think I got one of the little...
You got a scrimshaw thing, yeah.
Yeah, that was all. So I didn't ever bother to go back because I wanted to just continue the story because I was interested. But it was very good at creating atmosphere. And it was interesting that the one mission where I felt that the most was actually the one that was completely outside, when you're cleaning the outside of the ship.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of floating around in space, and you know, you're cleaning the exofungus off of the outside of this ship and then trying to figure out how to reroute the power to different places so you can activate things and then eventually get to a point where you can unlock it and get inside. But I really appreciated that aspect of it, that atmosphere that really it committed, and it did a very, very good job of building that.
And you got to say the soundtrack really sells it. Like it's got a
Yep.
very eerie, atmospheric soundtrack that I think really helps sell the loneliness, sell the isolation, and ultimately the sadness that your character feels as they walk through this space that they used to. She walks through this space and she keeps mentioning things to herself, where she's talking about her memories of the old farmer who used to let her hide from her terrible stepmom, or how she wished she had met the teacher because she seems like a really good person and like was doing all these important things, but that they'd never met each other. And she feels sad that there's this whole life that she never got to interact with.
Yeah, I agree. No, it is, I don't want this, I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound like I mean it negatively, and I actually don't. It's a bit of a thin game. Mechanics wise, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
It really is, let's spray stuff to get rid of stuff. And then mostly the only other real mechanic of any note is figuring out how to get power to certain things so that doors will open for you. I mean, that's about it mechanically.
Yeah.
And in terms of the story, again, there is a story there, but it is told in small little snippets through either emails or people's sort of like logs or journal entry type things that are there. And so that's all. It's a little thin in that regard, but they do so much with what's there that it makes it very compelling. This isn't a game that, had this been stretched out to 10 hours, I would not have finished it.
Yeah, I think that it was the exact right length. And
Correct.
I can go back if I feel, if I had got the druthers in the next week, I can go back and hop into some of those levels I've already done and do some cleaning, spray some water, get some scrimshaw. And that's nice that I can go back and revisit those things. But like, I think I can pull up Steam and find out exactly how long I spent, but it wasn't longer than 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And I think that was the perfect length for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was too. So it was, and I agree with you, and I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it. They did make the absolute right choice in making this Act 1, because I bought it expecting that it wasn't going to complete the story, but that I had this whole game. And that's the big thing with early access games, and why even if I do buy them, I often don't play them until I know they're done.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to put in time and get to a point where it's like, okay, well, that's as far as you can go now.
Yeah.
And who knows when our next update is going to come out and you're going to be able to get any further. But this, I think I appreciated basically their honesty. It was just honest. They were very forthright in here's what we have so far. This is Act 1 to completion. Boom.
Yeah.
There you go.
And they say, according to their site, tentatively Act 2 and 3 are supposed to come out in 2026. So we shouldn't have to wait too long. Hopefully this is not a Silk Song situation where they said, oh, this will be out next year. And then 9 years later, it finally comes out.
Later.
Yep. Granted, it doesn't have the cultural cachet of Hollow Knight. And I think that's to its benefit because, boy, I got to imagine it sucked to make Hollow Knight and then have everyone have their expectations through the roof for whatever you followed it up with. That's why it takes 8 years to make another one. I think it's worth mentioning the way that the mechanics work, I think, in this game. It is, for all intents and purposes, like Power Wash Simulator. You were spraying liquid everywhere, but it's a lot messier. And there are a lot of things that I think would make sense in a more robust game, like the explosive squirty juice, like the electric squirty juice, like the hey, this doesn't damage the seeds squirty juice, that I just didn't really use them very often because I didn't feel like I needed to. Yeah. I used the electric one when I had to open a door, and I never used
that's the only time I used it.
I never used the fire one once in a time where I was like, I needed to use the fire one. It was just like occasionally I felt like throwing the fire one out there. It was fun.
Oh, so the only time I literally ever used the fire one were the times where I would come around and I'd see the fungus that you have to use the fire one on.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Like,
I just never engaged with that fungus. I didn't realize that's what that's for, is for that one particular fungus. Now I'm like, oh, I thought those were just like weird Leviathan bits, and that's why I couldn't get through it.
No,
but
that kind of darker purplish red that kind of looks sort of wavy stuff that wasn't the clusters. Yeah, that was specifically for the fire stuff. So
I can go back and visit that stuff now.
Yeah, so it'd burn that away. And again, all that was ever found behind those was like a scrimshaw or something like that. So it wasn't anything essential, but that was literally the only time I ever used that. That's all that was ever for.
Yeah.
And I actually found the electrical one a little finicky at times, because I'm like, okay, I'm spraying. And there were other times where I'm like, well, this thing has electricity, but you're not recognizing that it has electricity. So the game is basically telling me, oh, well, you can use it, but you can't use it here.
There's another solution you need to solve. And you're like, but I don't need to.
Correct.
I shouldn't need to. I should be able to squirt my electric juice.
Yeah.
I mostly liked, you have like a grappling hook thing that you can use to both drag yourself to places and also drag the seeds to you, which I mostly liked. Occasionally it was really finicky, but it mostly worked the way I wanted it to.
And I think that part of my acceptance of how finicky it was just my brain going, hey, look, this is a budget title and a small team. I expect a certain degree of jank.
Absolutely.
And so I was okay with it. I found it annoying when I'm like, my bullseye is dead on this electrical or this explosive seed, and I activate it and it doesn't come to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, I'm like, this is small team budget title jank.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think it was really fun. I'm glad that we played it.
Yeah, me too.
I am very curious to see what happens with Dahlia and Maeve, because you can just tell Dahlia leaving fucked Maeve up bad. And, she eventually moved on and had another relationship that also ended poorly because we found that person's corpse. But she never really moved on. And I think that that's going to be a big part of what might happen in Acts 2 and 3 is you reckoning with the things that happened because you left. And I think that is an interesting storytelling device. And I think it did a really good job with it. And I'm very, very eager to see what they do next. I will, we bought this one. I think part of it was, hey, it's on sale in the Steam sale. Let's give it a try. I've heard good things. I'm going to be buying the new one on day one. I'm Act 2. I'm buying and playing the day it comes out, because I am very curious to see where this game goes from here and the type of story that this team wants to tell.
I agree.
Well, any final thoughts on Ambrosia Sky before we wrap for our first episode of 2026?
Just that I am glad that you suggested it. I am glad that we played it. And I'm glad that I didn't let myself bounce off at that 60-ish, 90-ish minutes where I was kind of not really invested. Because by the time it was done, like I say, I was very eager for continuation of the story and hopefully maybe some answers.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll be back in a couple of weeks, dear listeners, to chat about another fun topic, I'm sure. In the meantime, feel free to leave us a rating or a review, or you can reach out to us at feedback@themiddleofculture.com. And I hope that everyone listening has a better 2026 than 2025, even if by some amazing happenstance your 2025 was great. Well, I hope your 2026 is worse. But if you're like most of us and you're like, man, 2025 sucked, may 2026 be better for all of us, dear listeners.
We can only hope.
All right. We'll be back in 2 weeks. See y'all then.
Bye.